Howdy guys, say tech demos. Normally these things are just that, tech demos, but what if companies want to turn them into full franchises? Nintendo said hold my fucking beer.
I like tech demos. They can be a pretty good showcase of hardware. Sometimes they're just video showcasing a console's graphical capabilities, but sometimes companies can make playable demos as well. But to really sell it, companies might also bundle a game with the console just to really show what this thing can do. Console bundles were definitely around before the Wii, but I'd like to say that it popularized the tech demo bundle. They're not really tech demos, but rather simplistic minigame compilations that show off the console's hardware. Most of them, I say, are low quality grade A trash, but the one that managed to stick out in the eyes of many was Wii Sports. I mean, if you call selling over 80 million units worldwide and skyrocketing the Wii to the top of the best-selling consoles list sticking out, then I guess that counts. Everyone and literally your grandma knew what the Wii was. It brought in tens of millions of casual gamers with its simplistic and easy-to-use motion controls, and hey, it came with a game right in the box. Wii Sports started the oddball that was the Wii series. What started out as a tech demo that was made to reel in the consumer, then became a full-blown franchise. Games would usually come out to coincide with a new Wii peripheral, but then kinda started becoming cash grabby, which probably just led to the series' eventual obscurity. Now, I am very nostalgic for the original Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort, but I never played any of the other games until many years later, so that's why I'd like to talk about the Wii series as a whole, just to see what I think about the more obscure games and the more meaningless games. So why don't I start at the beginning with Wii Sports, the game that started it all. It was originally made as a tech demo that would show off the raw motion power of the Wii, then called the Nintendo Revolution. Two games were made, Sports Pack for Revolution and Party Pack with Revolution, with Sports Pack for Revolution becoming Wii Sports. It was first shown off at E3 2006. Prior to that, they had announced it as Wii Sports Tennis, but at E3 they had announced that it was going to be part of a sports package alongside baseball, golf, and Wii Sports Airplane. Obviously, this was scrapped and later repurposed in the game's sequel. In this version, you pretty much just flew through rings in an also scrap mission mode. I can only assume it was scrapped because the Wii Remote was just not up to snuff when it came to controlling something like this, but hey, maybe it was for the better. Imagine a world where Wii Sports Airplane actually came out.
Oh shit.
But f that, because it was replaced by bowling and boxing.
Cool.
The game finally came out on November 19th, 2006 alongside the Wii, one of the most prolific days out there. Hell, I never changed my calendar to anything but November 19th, 2006 because I refuse to accept that any other day exists. That was the day that boys became men, girls became women, and the Wii sold 600,000 units in its first 8 days. That day you came home from Circuit City with a Wii, extra Wii Remote, and a fresh copy of Wii Sports. For a while you could only get it through Wii bundles, which made sense, but that meant that the game came exclusively in a cardboard sleeve, except for Europe and Japan, which could be purchased separately. However, in 2011, it got a Nintendo Selects re-release and finally got a standard Wii box.
I love it when it does that.
Wii Sports is a simple motion control based minigame compilation. It doesn't have much in terms of substance, but makes up for it in troves with its simplicity. It might not seem like much now, but this was a huge deal back in 2006. Everyone was way excited for this new advanced way to play video games. Yeah, it wasn't that, but the point is that it drove in millions of people that never really played video games all that much. Another huge selling point was that you were in the game.
What?
Bundled with the Wii was the Me channel. This allowed you to do what every man, woman, and child with a Wiimote could possibly do: create a Me. You can make a Me that looks like you, one that doesn't look like you, or whatever the hell this thing is, and then you can play as that character in-game. As for the sports, there are 5: tennis, baseball, bowling, golf, and boxing, with extra training and Wii fitness modes on the side. Tennis is a pretty fun time. You can lob a ball between a few Miis while the spectators and multicolored glass of a crowd watch you play. You can play with some CPUs, or play with yourself if you feel so inclined. Baseball is probably my least favorite sport, probably just because I fucking hate baseball.
That guy sucks.
But most importantly, it suffers from one of the biggest problems Wii Sports has, that being its motion controls. You see, the controls are supposed to emulate you actually being in the game, like swinging the Wii Remote to hit a ball in tennis, or swinging the Wii Remote to hit a ball in baseball, or swinging the Wii Remote to hit the ball in golf, and you see my problem here? I get that they were going for simplicity, but it just gets less interesting after a while. Baseball is a perfect example of this, especially when you're the pitcher. Any slight movement registers as a pitch, which really negates the whole point of having motion controls in the first place. I guess the most I can say for it is that it's not completely terrible, so it's got that going for it. However, bowling does a complete 180 in the controls department because man, these are some tight controls. It's pretty much the perfect situation for the Wii's motion controls. Simple, basic movements that really translate well with the controller. I pretty much never have an issue with them. I also think that the bowling alley has some of the best atmosphere in the game. Seeing other Miis bowl beside you and walking alongside the alley, it really adds depth. Now remember how I said that baseball was my least favorite sport because its controls were simple in an almost deceiving way? Well, golf is equally frustrating for a completely different and much worse reason. Golf is all about precision. You have to aim and hit your ball very carefully in order to secure a good shot. So what do you get when you take a very precise sport and you combine it with a controller with the precision of a three-legged horse?
Do I even like this game?
Boxing, unlike the other sports, uses the nunchuck, another accessory bundled with the Wii that plugs into the bottom of the Wii remote and acts like a second motion device.
Dear God!
Well, I have to admit it is pretty satisfying to punch people with the sound effects and rumble mixing perfectly, but it's still a little simplistic for me. All you really do is punch, dodge when necessary, and that's pretty much it.
Now you see me complain about a lack of content, which may seem bad at first, but you want to know how to fix that? It's a little thing called ingenuity, also known as just do this.
Oh, there's all the content. I was wondering where it went. This is the training mode, a collection of small challenges based on each of the sports designed to help you train. There's a lot of variety in what you get here. Some of them are boring like swing control, and some of them are complete bullshit like any of the golf ones, but the others, they're surprisingly fun to play. They mainly consist of score-based mini-games, which makes it enjoyable to try to beat your high score. If you get a high enough score, you can get a medal, which can then be shown on your Wii message board. It's certainly not perfect and doesn't really fix my issues with the controls, but it's one of my favorite parts of the game.
Wii Fitness mode sucks.
All it really does is have a few of the mini games from the training mode, then uses God knows what kind of science to determine your Wii Fitness age, and if that sounds familiar, that's because it was later expanded into its own game, Wii Fit. Like, I see what they're trying to do here, but it just does not work. Wii Sports isn't really the same as a full workout, and it just seems like it was added to pad out the game. Despite all I've said, I really love Wii Sports. Sure, it has its problems, however, I am very fond of it for quite a few reasons. For one, it's got a really nice aesthetic in an odd mid-2000s tech demo kind of way. Nothing can really compare to the amount of charm I feel when playing it, but I think the most important factor is just the amount of nostalgia I feel for this game. It was not only the first game I played on my Wii, but it was one of the first games I can remember playing in my life, which is really why I'm such a huge Nintendo fan to this day. I just have a lot of fun memories with this game, and going back to replay it now just makes me feel happy all over again.
I think it's safe to say that Wii Sports is a very odd case. It just reeks of mid-2000s Nintendo charm and is a very special game in my eyes. It had what was at the time revolutionary motion controls, on top of the fact that the games were simple and easy to use, just contributed to its large sales numbers. However, the controls have just not aged well at all, and they're only getting worse with time. But at least it had that going for it. If you remember, Nintendo was also developing a second game alongside Wii Sports. Well, if Wii Sports was meant to showcase the power of the motion controls, then what else could you possibly want a Wii Remote to do?
Wii Play was developed right alongside Wii Sports and mainly consisted of some of the mini-games that couldn't be put into Wii Sports. The purpose of these games were to show off the numerous features of the Wii Remote's IR pointer capabilities as opposed to the motion controls like in Wii Sports. When it was first shown off at E3 2006, there was no mention of Wii Play. In fact, it wasn't even a collection of games yet. Instead, the individual mini-games were labeled as the remote pointer demos. Due to time constraints and more of the development team putting their priorities on Wii Sports, a lot of the games shown off were never actually put into the game. Most of them were just put into the other games in the Wii series like Wii Fit and Wii Music. Eventually, Nintendo would reveal that the demos from E3 would become part of a collection titled Wii Play, and it would release as a launch title in Japan. It released on December 2nd, 2006, the same day that the Wii launched in Japan, and it would take around 2 months for the game to finally release in North America on February 12th, 2007. Now, would I put that date on my calendar?
No, why the hell would I?
While Wii Sports was packaged with the console, you had to buy Wii Play separately for $50. It didn't have the advantage of being a pack-in title, but it did have the benefit of being bundled with a Wii Remote. At the time, most Wiis came with only one Wii Remote, meaning if you wanted to play multiplayer games, you had to buy one separately. Since the price of a Wii Remote was around $40 at the time, if you bought the bundle, you'd basically be getting a new Wii Remote and a $10 bonus game, and it worked. It didn't sell nearly as high as Wii Sports did, but it did become the 5th best-selling Wii game with over 28 million units sold worldwide.
God, I hate it when it does that.
Wii Play is very similar to Wii Sports, which makes sense since both games had a lot of the same developers working on them at the same time. The main difference here is just how you control the games. In most of the games, you have to control them by pointing the Wii remote at the screen and doing various things like press a button, or rotate it, or move it forward and back. In Wii Sports, each of the games were just very popular sports, but in Wii Play, the themes of each game vary drastically by comparison. They're all score-based games, just like the ones in the Wii Sports training mode, but this time around there are actually 9 games to choose from. Wow, round up the cavalry, there's 4 more f***ing games this time. The first game is called Shooting Range. Fun fact, this was actually one of the demos from E3 2006, and many people at the convention thought it was going to be a remake of Duck Hunt from the NES just because of how similar the two games are. It's just your basic shooting gallery. You can shoot at balloons, targets, clay pigeons, empty cans, and even spaceships in the final level. The controls are fine, I guess, but a bit basic considering that it feels like a game version of selecting a channel on the Wii menu. Up next is Find Me. Fun fact, I'm bored. In this game, you have to find Miis with certain description, like Miis that look the same or ones that are facing a different direction, and that's the whole thing! Yeah, I guess some of the categories get more difficult the longer you play, but there's really nothing else to it. They introduce some new elements like, hey, the Miis are in an escalator now, and hey, the Miis are in space now, and hey, the Miis are on an escalator again, but this time it's in the dark!
Well, I'm sold.
In table tennis, you have to rally a ball between yourself and a CPU. It's kind of like Wii Play's own version of tennis, but this one is way more awkward to control. It feels more natural to swing the remote to hit the ball instead of pointing where you want to hit the ball than it does it on its own. It's just not right. Remember those demos from E3? Well, one of those demos, Obstacle Course, never made it into the final game. Kinda. Pose Me is kind of that. They took one element from that demo and made it into a full experience. You have to fit your Mii into a bubble using different poses that you make with the A and B buttons. Again, that is the whole thing. They try to shake it up a little bit by making a whole bunch of bubbles appear at once or turning the bubbles upside down, which admittedly is probably more interesting than the other games, but it's still nothing substantial. Laser hockey is just Pong, but I do have to admit I am a sucker for the art style here. It reminds me a lot of late 2000s Xbox Live Arcade games, which I'm very fond of. Hey, have you ever wanted to play pool but with way more frustrating controls? Then Billiards is for you! Fishing is an okay game, it's relatively fun to play, but its art style is just completely different than the rest of the game, which leads us to the last 2 games, Charge and Tanks. You know what Wii Play was missing? Cow riding.
Well, there's the nearly 30 million sales figures right there.
In this game, you ride a cow and run over scarecrows. Is that a hurdle? Yikes, what a twist! And last but certainly not worst, tanks. Wow, this is actually somewhat interesting. You control a tank and you have to take out every enemy tank on the screen. As you progress, different tank variants begin to appear. Ones that can move faster, shoot faster bullets, ones that lay landmines. It can actually become quite challenging, but in a fun and interesting way. You have to be constantly aware of your surroundings because one hit can kill you instantly. I've actually had quite a lot of fun playing this game, and it's certainly my favorite game in the whole collection. As for Wii Play itself, I have to say I'm pretty disappointed. It's got a lot of the same charm and aesthetics I feel when playing Wii Sports, but the games are just so bland and uninteresting. And it's not like they didn't have anything to work with either, because they did. The demos at E3 2006 were way more interesting than what was put into the final game, and really could have made it into a much better experience. I guess to add insult to injury, I also had no idea this game even existed until long after I had stopped playing my Wii, so I'm not very nostalgic for it at all. However, Wii Play and Wii Sports would become relevant once again, over a decade later, in a somewhat odd tribute. In June 2020, Nintendo released Clubhouse Games, 51 worldwide classics for the Nintendo Switch. It's a simple but also charming collection of board games, but aside from the card and tabletop games, some of them either pay homage to or completely copy the games from the Wii series. For example, you got toy versions of tennis, baseball, and boxing, but you also literally have bowling and golf, with golf having the exact same courses from Wii Sports, which actually originated in the black box version of NES Golf. As for the Wii Play side of things, you have air hockey and fishing, which are similar to the Wii Play versions, but not totally alike. But then billiards, shooting range, and battle tanks are almost exactly like the Wii Play versions, just with some of them having a different perspective. It was just so odd seeing these games have a second life in a completely different Nintendo series over a decade after they had lost all relevance. Overall, it's hard to say that these games haven't made an impact in some way, and by that I just mean Wii Sports. I can guarantee that almost all of you have played a Wii at some point in your life. Whether you have owned one or not, I bet the first game that comes to mind when you think of the Wii is Wii Sports. It introduced a lot of the world not only into a new way to play video games, but gaming in general, which is nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, sure, they're not the best, whether that be in controls or just plain fun factor, but they were merely the stepping stones for what was left to come.
While Wii Sports was a nice game to look back on and Wii Play existed, its success would later go on to garner multiple sequels and spin-offs, and trust me, it gets weirder from here on out, so strap in, it's gonna be a very mediocre ride. But to end things, I'd like to bring attention to the one thing that Wii Play can do better than Wii Sports. Its box art is orange!